today's AVST Live webinar on enterprise mobility. The title is Engaging Employees in a Mobile Digital World. This is Ann Rude with AVST Marketing, and today we have presenting Neil Butler, our Director of Sales Engineering. And before I turn the presentation over to Neil, just want to let you know that the slides are available for download. They're in the handouts area of the webinar panel, so if you expand that, you should see place where you can download those. We will also send them out via email once we conclude today, and in addition to that, we will send a link to the recording. We will be recording this. Want to also let you know we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, and you're welcome to type your questions in at any time, and then once Neil wraps up the presentation, we'll of course have those queued up and open it up for the questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Neil.
Thank you, Ann. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is one of the kind of fun webinars to do with what we get to talk about. And in our industry, this is a very exciting time to be providing communication software, unified communication software, because the market is changing so much. The infrastructure is changing, the applications are changing, mobile devices, the whole way we work is changing, and we're riding on top of that, trying to keep up with that. And we've been doing this for a long time. People sometimes haven't heard of us, or they don't really understand why we would be comfortable, sitting in front of a webinar group like this and talking about these solutions. And it's because we have a pretty solid understanding of the market. We've been developing our software since 1982, selling it since 1985, and selling it continuously and successfully that whole time. We are one of the largest players in this segment of the market, and we're pretty comfortable with what's going on in the market. And we're pretty comfortable that we are delivering the right kind of solutions. We tend to be on the leading edge of what's needed out there, we think. And we hear this from our customers more than anyone else. And we're recognized as best-of-breed applications in a lot of categories. So we're pretty comfortable talking about what goes on out in the enterprise in terms of communications. Fortunately, PowerPoint is not comfortable with it.
Oh, that's not good.
That's all right.
I can try to pull up the slides as a backup if we need to.
Sure. I don't think we will, but we'll see here shortly. It just likes
Sorry,
to do
folks,
this to me
please bear with us.
And we're back. All right. So when we talk about unified communications, of course, that spans a lot of areas. It's very much a catch-all kind of phrase. So we're going to narrow it down a little bit about what we're going to be talking about now and what we do. But in every presentation, we do tend to talk about some components consistently. We look at communications from the consumer's point of view, who's consuming our technology, and it gets deployed in a number of ways out there within the enterprise. Certainly, all of this started as pure premise, kind of functionality. Every company had their phone system, their voicemail, their network, their email system, all on-premise, all fully controlled, and that gave you a lot of really good access to things to build these solutions, and that's how the industry developed. But of course, in the last few years, we've seen the emergence of the cloud, and the cloud is now a very popular player in terms of providing unified communications functionality. And what that means is part, or in some cases almost all, of an enterprise's communication software can be deployed up in the cloud. And that changes how things work and how you access things. But it doesn't really change what the users need. What the users need is the same no matter how it gets deployed. And that's a very important concept, and it's one we focus on. And the reason we focus on it is it's a major challenge for us to stay on top of all the different pieces of software and application functionality that go into a unified communication solution. We certainly don't provide it all, and as a result, we spend a lot of time making sure we can connect to what is in the enterprise. We have a slide somewhere that says enterprises are complex, and that's an understatement in terms of not only what they have, but how much is changing within an enterprise. So for us, we want to make sure that the solutions we offer and we talk about when we bring you to a webinar like this are universal, in that you don't have to wait for the list from us of all the things you have to change in your enterprise to deploy our solutions. We work with any phone system out there you have, and if you have an old one, and we'll work with that, and when you get ready to work with a new one, we'll go with that. We are really agnostic about your email and your groupware infrastructure. Pretty much everything we do regardless, and we support multiple instances of all those types of programs. We stay on top of what's current in the enterprise and make sure that our people can spend all their time talking to you about what we do and not about how much of your enterprise you have to change out. So today the pieces we're going to talk about are going to apply to somebody that just moved to a brand new cloud telephone system and somebody that's running an old Definity via PBX still getting their money's worth out of it. It really won't matter. Unified communications from our view does not require a rip and replace approach. So as we start talking about unified communications and the mobile employee, there's a number of pieces that we focus on because mobile employees are different. You start this kind of the solution development by understanding first what the employee has when they aren't mobile, because most of us are in pretty good shape. Most of us have a good phone system, a solid network, a groupware package with all the right tools, and we all work in that kind of same method of opening up email and doing a triage and moving through our business day with all the tools right there at the desk. The issue with mobility is when you leave that desk, you leave that behind. And yes, people tell me all the time, oh no, I have all these wonderful devices, and that's true. People carry devices, we all do. Some of them carry an embarrassing number of devices, but you still can't quite tie it all together in the same way. And that's what we try and do. And one of the biggest things we do to support that functionality when you're away from your desk is we allow you to drive those applications on our side with speech recognition. Unlike most of our competitors, this is not a new thing for us. Our speech recognition engine and solutions are over 15 years old because we had very solid vision in the early days that speech would become a very important interface. And it's definitely one whose time has come if you look at what's out there in the way of speech. And what speech does for you is it gives you productivity gains, first of all. I can talk about our products in terms of how it converts unproductive time into productive time. And the easiest and most obvious one is in your commuting time. And we'll look at what we offer a user in that kind of environment. And cost savings, a lot of this speech recognition functionality can lower employee count and things like that and make sure that the technology pays for itself. And the reduction in latency is a very important piece. There's always studies that tell you how many customers you have to recruit new to make up for the ones you're losing and those kind of things. And we all know expectations are high. Back when I first started working for a living, there was no voicemail, there was no networks, there was no email, and communications was pretty simple. Someone called you, and if you didn't answer the phone, somebody took a message on a little pink notepad and put it on your desk, and the expectation was if they called you in the morning and missed you, that you would call them in the afternoon. And if they called you in the afternoon and missed you, that you would get back to them the next day. That's certainly not expectations today. First of all, people are upset they didn't get you real time, and secondly, they're counting the minutes after they've left you any kind of notification or message, expecting you to get back to them. And we have pretty good tools for doing that. But reducing that transaction latency is something you can do to really improve customer service, and the way we do that is by enabling communications in more environments for an employee with more tools. And then this technology also is great. We talk to people all the time, specifically about our speech automated attendant functionality, who say, no, our business believes in a human being answering that first call. We like that personal touch. We fully support that, but even in that environment, there are things you can do that will extend the value of our product. And basically what I mean is perhaps just by when your console operators go offline at 5 p.m., by switching it over to a speech app and extending your operational hours for those customers who might still be calling in, or internally deploying it. There's a study somewhere that shows 20-something% of calls going to an attendant console inside an enterprise are internal calls. So even if you just offloaded those with a speech automated attendant, those are the kind of gains you see with speech. And speech is ready. Speech has been out there a long time now. In the early days, there were lots of jokes about how bad it was, and it was in some cases. But now if you look at the number of large enterprises that are using it, which is a good thing because that means they put money into it and the technology gets better, There's probably nobody on this webinar right now that hasn't used a self-service speech application with an airline or a bank or in some call center, and they work pretty good. You have to design them correctly, of course, but the speech recognition piece has come of age. And the tolerance piece has come of age largely because so many of us have been exposed to it on our mobile devices. With all these speech interfaces on our mobile devices, we've learned the ins and outs and the drawbacks, but we know it can work. It can be useful. The ability to make a call while you're driving your car, through Siri or whatever device you have. Most of us understand the value of that. And in a lot of cases, desktop applications have started using this. Dictation. If you look at Nuance's Dragon Natural Speaking, if you've ever used that, it's a very, very good program. And whether you're using it on a non-visual desktop deployment or just for convenience, we know that this technology is there. And we've been riding this technology curve the whole time. If you know a little bit about our history, you know we're actually two companies that were merged together about 12 years ago. And one of those companies, Sound Advantage, started out its life as a speech applications company. So from the time that company was started, we have been in this industry, and that's a long, long time. And what we found is there's three areas where we think we can offer you value from a speech recognition application. And the first one we'll talk about is Automated Attendant. Speech Automated Attendant is something that in many cases people can deploy, see an immediate lowering in costs by offloading this fairly simple function. But to do it correctly, you have to have kind of gone through the wars and understand things like alias names and disambiguation and pieces like that, which we have. Then there's an outside caller interface on top of that, that if you use a speech recognition interface and don't get through, the expectation is when the system comes back to you, you can still use speech. And that's true with us, not true with many of our competitors. And then, of course, the one that is probably measurably going to deliver the biggest value is the full speech user interface. And that's how we turn so much of the unproductive time, particularly in a car, into productive time. Now keep in mind, all these applications have a 15-year history. This isn't version 1 like you'll find in most of the competing products. We've had a long time to get this out there, to make mistakes, have them corrected, to get incredible pieces of feedback from our customers. So we're very comfortable talking about how we stand in terms of deploying these technologies. So we're going to go through a little bit of this functionality really quickly. Speech Automated Attendant is the first one we'll look at. Speech Automated Attendant, you've all experienced it. You call in, and basically it prompts you to say the user's name or department name, or in our case, everything. Everything is actually speech-enabled, which is not the case for most products, but it makes a very smooth kind of functionality up front. So we're going to ask who they want to talk to. We're going to ask them who's calling, and then we're going to go and we're going to put it into our really processing, our very advanced processing engine. Here's just kind of a little sound at what it's like.
At any time during this greeting, you can simply say the name of the person or the department you want to reach. For a list of departments, please say options.
John Tyler.
Who's calling, please?
Mark Reed.
One moment, please.
Now there's an example of a call comes in. If you know the name of the person you're talking to, which let's face it, almost all the callers would, rather than having to go through a dial, a spell the name kind of directory, the value of just speaking the name and putting that call through is very clear to almost all callers. Now, unlike most of the other companies that develop this technology, we don't then simply transfer the call. We've tied this together. Our platform is unusual in that everything we have is all part of one large application. These aren't multiple servers and applications bolted together. These are systems that are all developed at the same time on the same platform, meaning when somebody calls you on the Automated Attendant, we would know if you were logged into your system. When that's not true of any other system out there. Any other system out there, you could be logged into your mailbox, listening to messages, and when someone calls, it's going to just blind transfer that call to you anyway. In our case, because we know you're there, it would give you the option to take that call. You get a little tone in your ear and hear, you have a call from Mark Reed, what would you like to do? That integration of functionality is one of the reasons our system does such a better job at meeting customer needs. Now, as you develop Speech Automated Attendant, there's a lot of things you learn along the way. Not everyone wants to be in the directory. So we're completely flexible in terms of whether the users are in the directories or not. Alias names are a must. And alias names are sometimes misunderstood, but this is just what is the caller likely to say, whether it's accurate or not, in terms of asking for somebody by name. And there's a lot of areas that come into play. If you think about Dr. Robert Johnson, somebody might say Robert Johnson, they might say Bob Johnson, they might say Dr. Johnson, they might say Dr. Robert Johnson. All of those names have to be recognizable as this person. So you have the kind of honorifics and nicknames you have to deal with. And then there's mispronunciation of names that you can catch and map out in advance. I have somebody whose first name I used to work with called Iasmerta, and the way it was spelled, you would never say it that way. But by putting an alias name in that is correct for what people are probably going to say, you simply make the system work smoothly. And having alias names is something that we do exceedingly well, unlimited alias name support, and none of our competition does a very good job at that. Disambiguation for name overlap is another piece. As you move into the enterprise market, you quickly find out there are lots of people that have the same name within an average enterprise, and you need to be able to deal with that. And the way we deal with that is we have a disambiguation piece that will let us say, okay, for this instance, they're all in one city. What we're going to do is use department names. So we create the functionality such that if somebody says Mark Reed, the system will come back and say, you mean Mark Reed in sales or Mark Reed in operations? That same disambiguation works for, besides departments and buildings and locations, cities. So a lot of our systems get deployed across the entire United States with local call components all over the place. And when somebody calls in from Chicago and says a name, most likely you only want to use the names in Chicago. And while that seems very obvious, that's a very strong competitive advantage for our product that we do that. So local directories, even departmental directories. If you have an application where you say the name of the person you wish to reach or the department, somebody says sales, and then you have a sales menu that you go to and you offer them options, and you say the person you're looking for, you pretty much only want to be looking at the salespeople, and all of that can be done. And then we have a nice API that we use for directory synchronization to other directories when that's required. And besides the name directory, all the commands in our menu can be speech enabled. And that's unique. Everyone else is kind of say the name or press 6 for that and 5 for that. We can fully enable a menu with speech. You can use all DTMF, all speech, or any mix that you want that makes sense in your application. Now in most cases, this goes ahead and transfers out, and if you don't get the party, it usually comes back, and what people hear are, either just a personal greeting is very typical, and they leave a message, and none of that's going to be speech, so it's a little confusing. But we also extend it out to the outside caller interface. So if the caller tries unsuccessfully to reach someone, then we have that same kind of speech handling that makes it very intuitive and easy to use. So here's what you might experience in terms of having a call come back into the system when it wasn't answered.
Who's calling, please?
Mark Reed.
One moment, please. John Tyler is not available. Please say, locate, leave a message, try another person, or operator.
And pardon the typo there that I just saw, but I think you can understand the process. So making a user comfortable with speech initially and then taking it away from them it's kind of complex, and you really don't want to do that. You want that smooth application functionality from start to end, and that's something that we can deliver. And then, of course, the last piece of speech, and I think dollar by dollar the best value in terms of adding a UC communications to a system, assuming you have any mobile users at all, is the speech user interface. And we always make a point of saying the full user interface, because so many of our competitors enable a few things with speech. And one of them just lets you say names, and everything else has to be DTMF. And one of them lets you press a digit or say the number of the digit. So press or say 1. That's really not delivering any functionality. The trick here is mostly you're going to use this interface in a hands-free, eyes-free environment, which means it has to be complete. So we have packaged for the mobile user a software license package called Atom, and Atom ties all of this speech functionality together with our virtual assistant and some of our other functionality. So what now happens when people call in is they're not only getting speech, but they're getting much more functionality. So I told you everything works together. So our speech automated attendant, somebody says your name. I've already said if you're in the system, it'll tell you, would you like to take this call? But it's much more intelligent than that. It can look at your calendar. And if your calendar says you're in a meeting, you can have this programmed to create a custom greeting on the fly saying you're in your meeting and announcing what time you're coming out. And if you're on vacation, the same kind of thing. If it goes to the list of where it should call you and it notices that the first location on your list is your desk phone, but because you have our mobile app, it knows you're not in the office, then it can send it directly to your mobile phone. Basically, it lets you know who's calling before you accept the call, and all of this interaction, all this context that's used on the site happens automatically. And what this means is the user doesn't have to think about it. The user doesn't have to go through their day recording greetings, changing settings. It's just automatically going to do that. And all of that comes from Atom, from having it all tied together. The interface piece of Atom, where you get into your mailbox with speech commands, is the one that I think most people find impressive and very useful. You can certainly talk to any of us who use this system, and we will wax semi-eloquent over how we use it and what the features we like the best are. And interesting, everybody likes kind of a different feature set. But what you can do once you're logged in is think of this as a virtual desktop, a speech-driven virtual desktop. Just like if you were sitting in front of your computer at your desk and you had to call somebody, well, you can call them. Well, you can do that within this interface. You can call contacts, system users, manual phone numbers, anything you want to do. Sitting at your desk, you can get to your messages from the screen, and you can get to your messages from our system using speech commands. You can get your voice messages. You can have your email read to you. Just like you can access your calendar at your desk, you can get your calendar with speech commands. You can create a new meeting request. Basically, everything you would do with your computer when you're at your desk has been set up in a virtual environment for you to use when you're not at your desk. And once again, this is that product that we've been working on for so long and with so much customer input that everybody that uses this has nothing but good things to say about kind of how easy it is to move to this type of interface. So if we listen to just kind of a real simple session here.
What would you like to do?
Get new messages.
One moment, please. You have 3 unread messages. Message number 1, an email message from Mark Reed. Message subject, the Martin Project. Message body, hi John, we need to talk about the Martin Project. Call me as soon as you can.
And that's just kind of a typical session that we would have day in and day out every time we call in. Now it's interesting, reading email messages over the phone is one of those features that some people love, some people don't see any value in. And it has to do with, I think, how your day goes down in terms of people who spend a lot of time in a car probably find it pretty handy. It's much better to do that than it is to try and balance your mobile device on your knee as you're rolling down the freeway. It's interesting for us, because we've been in this industry for so long, to listen to the quality of the text-to-speech. When we started in this industry and our first version of text-to-speech, it was very difficult to understand. If you lost the thread of a message while you were listening to it, you sometimes couldn't get it back again. It was that poor. Now that's not the case. It's very easy to understand, and no one really complains about the legibility of the text-to-speech anymore. If it's something that you would find useful, you'll find in our product it's absolutely top-notch and very easy to use. You know, we discovered a long time ago that though we're kind of thought of as a voicemail and messaging company, that's not really where we make our value statement. We know for a fact that if a call comes in, you would much rather we connect that call the first time than just take a message. So our call handling engine is the most powerful one in the world. We've talked a little bit about it on this already, where we can read your calendar, we can read your physical location, we know what device we should send the call to. We have all these tools to complete those calls. But the downside of that is you get a lot more calls. So what we've also done is give calls or tools to the user when they see a call, besides just accepting the call. So when I answer and I hear something, it'll tell me who the call is from, and it'll then give me choices. If I say accept call, of course, it'll connect me. Reject will send the call to voicemail. Acknowledge will actually let me record a brief acknowledgement message to the caller that they'll hear. I'm not committing to take the call. I'm moving on, but I want to acknowledge that caller and give him some vital information about when he can expect to hear from me. I could also choose to transfer that call to another of my devices or to another user. So here's one of those sessions.
You have a call from Mark Reed. Please say accept call, reject call, acknowledge, transfer call, or review call.
Acknowledge.
Please record a brief acknowledgement.
Hi, Mark. I'm in a meeting, and we'll call you back when I get out in about an hour. Now, I can tell you for our field sales force, with their life on the road, in and out of meetings, in and out of their car, this is one of their favorite features. Basically, the biggest frustration probably for leaving a voicemail message for someone is the greeting that says, hi, sorry I missed the call, leave me a message, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. There's really no informational content in that message. But being able to do things like this, you can set callback expectations. You can pick and choose which calls are more important than what you're doing currently, but at the same time, rather than just send everybody to voicemail, you can do a really good job at giving them an expectation for what's going on. This interface also does calendar access. We talked about that. You can read your calendar. You can create new appointments. This is another one where we talk a lot about who uses what piece of it. I read my appointments almost every day. I climb in my car, and the first thing I do is say, get my appointments for today, and it reads out my appointments. I rarely create an appointment on the fly. One of our inside or outside salespeople up here in the north, he tells a story about a day when he was driving, when he had a whole exchange with a customer, where the customer sent him a voicemail, and he listened to it, and he replied by, using our system to reply, which sent the customer back a message, an email message with a WAV file attachment, and in the end, after a double exchange, he then created an appointment and invited that customer to the meeting, all while he was driving down the freeway. So here's kind of a calendar session in terms of what it sounds like.
What would you like to do?
Get my appointments for today.
One moment, please. You have one appointment on Tuesday, July 9th. Appointment number 1 is a meeting scheduled by Alan Thomas, starting on Tuesday, July 9th at 2 p.m. for 30 minutes. Subject, software update discussion.
So knowing what your meetings are during the day, particularly in terms of, for me, for my drive into work, is just very, very handy. Once again, what we're duplicating is what you will probably do when you get to your office and you open your groupware package, and the first thing you're going to do is go to your calendar and kind of do a quick, what's my schedule today? So being able to do this while you're mobile, we think is a pretty good thing. Now this next piece I keep meaning to change because while it's completely accurate, this is not the really good thing about contacts access. If you have our personal assistant licenses, we're going to sync your groupware contacts into our system so you can use them. And yes, one of the things you can do is call in and have it read information to you about the contact. But you're rarely going to do that. The real strength here is, since I do have that contact in my system, I can make a phone call to them. So I can say, call John Tyler. It'll come back and say, at which number, mobile, business, or home? And then it'll make a call for me, which is great. I can forward a message to them. If I have a voice message or an email message, and I want John Tyler to have a copy of that message, I can actually say, forward this message, who to, John Tyler, and then I can record a brief announcement to the message. I can recognize incoming calls from John Tyler from his A&I number and put his name in the message subject in my email system. So basically, our contacts access widens our access from just people in the system to people in the system plus all my contacts in terms of all this functionality. It is a great addition to anybody who spends a lot of time supporting customers and has them in their contacts. So let's wander away from speech a little bit here, and let's talk about the other piece that's a big part of mobile life. As all of you know, the mobile world is probably the fastest moving part of unified communications landscape today. And I say that because the average age of a phone is just a little over a year in the business world. People are updating their phones just a little over a year. And if you look at the major devices out there, they're running at about that same kind of schedule as well. So it's great that they're out there, but it's a pretty big job to support them. So for right now, we have focused on Android and iPhone or iOS devices exclusively. That might change as other devices, if they start gaining some market share, but for now that's what we support. And we have native applications that you download from the store. So you go out to iTunes or Google Play, you download these applications. With a personal assistant license, you can now go ahead and put this in and configure it, and it gives you a very wide range of functionality. We have whole webinars that we do on the mobile client, which you can catch if you're interested. But basically, what this does is kind of twofold. On the call side, it does some great things. One, it segments your personal and business calls. You can make your personal calls through your phone normal, make your business calls through our app, and then we can actually give you a record at the end of the month of somebody's business calls for managing billing cycles. It lets you not only make outgoing calls and gives you mobile number protection when it does it. It doesn't show the mobile number, but it also lets you handle incoming calls. And we'll look at that in a couple of screens down there. So for users who are out and about and use their device a lot, this is a great addition to their device. It does a wide array of things, certainly in the availability side. We talk about that context routing where we know where to send all the calls. That's really, really solid, but life changes things on us. So if I got out of a meeting an hour early and get in my car to go somewhere, I really don't want, calls being told, yeah, you can't get him, he's in a meeting. I want to override that. I can do that with a speech interface. I can also do it from the mobile client. And I can say, yeah, even though it says I'm in a meeting for the next hour, go ahead and send it to my mobile device anyway. So it's just a great tool for doing that. And this is all about a personal touch for callers, giving them more information when they call, a better chance to connect, setting a callback expectation, all of that. And the one environment that I think people are most impressed with, if you're a person who spends his days in meetings, first of all, I'm sorry for that. That's just not a really fun way to go. But if you are, you probably already have your device sitting next to you. And once again, multiple devices are not uncommon. And you're reading your email because an email message can come through important enough to pull you out of that meeting. That triage is an important piece for a lot of us. What you can't do is manage your calls. You really can't answer calls, can't interrupt the meeting and say, hold on a second, let me answer this and see who it is. You just can't do that. But what we've added is the ability to triage incoming calls silently in a meeting. And how this works is call comes in, if the system is programmed correctly, and if, let's say, it's from a contact or another system user, it's going to pop up on your screen and show you this is an incoming call from John Smith. And now what do I want to do? If I'm working an issue with John and this is a hot issue, I just step outside, hit take call, and I've got that call. Or I know who John Smith is and I just shake my head and hit reject and it goes to voicemail. But there's kind of that middle category, and we had that acknowledge, that wonderful acknowledge feature through the speech user interface. We have it here, silent acknowledge, where I hit a button and now this menu comes up and I click, we'll call in 15 minutes, and the caller hears, Neil Butler was unable to take your call, but we'll call you back in 15 minutes. So you now can do a silent triage of calls sitting at your desk or in a meeting. All of this, of course, is a key piece of our, we started talking about the environment and how many areas we have to look out after, and Adam is really wrapped around this. We support connecting to contacts if you have Exchange on site, or if you have Office 365, or you have Gmail. We expect making phone calls. All of this functionality basically is kind of independent of how you've deployed the rest of your solutions. If we talk about unified messaging and the contacts and the calendar access, we certainly do that for on-site systems. If you've got Exchange or Notes or basically any of the typical enterprise systems or any IMAP compatible system, then all of this functionality works, and you basically have your choice of unified messaging types. This screen's talking about storing messages. in the email server, one of the ways people want to go. And it's something that we do. You get a nice little player in the email client. And now if you're pushing your messages out to your mobile devices with Exchange ActiveSync, you're getting your voicemail messages as well. So this is server-based UM, and we support it pretty much in any environment. And as I said, including cloud environments. So if this is the way you want to go, simple way to do it. A lot of other people want to leave their messages on CX, but still have them in their email client. We do that as well. That's called client-based unified messaging. This is the one where you actually have two inboxes, one for email and one for voicemail and fax. And this is another option that we offer. Both the options of server-based and client-based do require a license for users. And our third option, which is tending to be very popular, does not. And it isn't just that it's free that it's so popular. This is a version where we leave the messages on CX and we let the users get to them from our web client. The web client's a free part of CX. When you put CX in, you can deploy the web client. And now you can play the messages over the phone or over the speakers. What you can't do is get them out of the system. There's no way to forward them to an email address. There's no file, copy, save. There's no cache copy that a smart user can dig down and find. So this is kind of positioned as secure UM for those sites where they want to make sure their voice messages don't get mixed up in their email or get off site. So if you have compliance and confidentiality issues, basically that's how you deploy it. Once again, very easy to deploy. It deploys on the customer's web server. Simplified unified messaging is actually more of a notification tool than unified messaging. You can enable a user such that when they get a voice message, we will send a copy of that message out to an email address. You can also set up the user so they can maintain control of that themselves, including changing the email address if they want to. Or it can all be locked down by the administrator. There are now 2 copies of the message. And 2 copies of the message means you have to delete it over the phone and delete it from the email client. But this is a good applications tool. There's a lot of things that this tool, a lot of issues that this solves. You also can set this up where it doesn't send a copy of the message, but just sends a link to Web Phone Manager to get to the message. So once again, for the confidentiality piece, we spend a lot of time talking about confidentiality in messaging. There's a lot of people who are very worried about disclosure, e-documents, all of these pieces. We think we have the right suite in place where you can choose a version that meets what your needs are. And our web client gives you great access to it, gives you the client, the GUI client for high productivity, but still locks it down so it doesn't get outside your system. And then all of this, of course, runs through your network in such a way that your IT staff will be comfortable with it. So unified communications, the mobile employee, we probably do twice as much in that area as anyone else. And if we kind of wrap this up by looking at what we jokingly call the perfect unified communication user's day, you can get a feeling for how this works out for people who are using our solutions. I support the East Coast, and as a result, I actually support our EMEA operations occasionally as well. So it's not unlikely that I'd be up at 3:30 in the morning for a webinar. Now the rules in my system, because I have this routing engine I've talked about, are from 6 a.m. my time to 7 p.m. my time, 7 days a week. If people call me, send me those calls. And then all the rules for where to send them are in place. But if I get up, at 3:30 in the morning, I'm doing a webinar, I don't really want to have, I don't really want calls coming in right in the middle of that. So the system knows that. But it is also smart enough to know that if at 4:30 when the webinar is over, I don't go back to bed, I go into work. As soon as I drive out of my my parking spot at home, it knows I'm on the road, and my rules say, oh, if it's a work day and he's left home, he's fair game. So it goes ahead and it sends calls to me. So people will call in and they'll either ring me or it'll give them the choice to track me down. And it's doing this with the mobile client that we talked about. That location feature says he is not at home any longer. So when a call comes in, basically the way it works is it pings him, and it pings my device and says, is he at home? And when the answer no comes back, it sends me that call. I drive into the parking lot at work. Once again, mobile location knows I'm at work. So when a call comes in and the rule says, first try him at his desk, it's going to say, is he at his desk? Well, he's at work. We know that. Let's send him that call. Sometime in the day, of course, we've already talked. I go into a meeting, and it comes back, and it says I'm in a meeting. Now, I might just play a greeting and go to voicemail, but as we've discussed, in my case, when I'm in a meeting, I'm going to get the silent pop-up so that I can at least know what's going on in calls coming into me. I go back to my desk. Calendar knows I'm not there. It knows to send calls to my desk phone. I go out to lunch, and now this is a little different, right? I'm going to go out to lunch. It knows when I've driven out of the parking lot from the location piece, so it knows to use my mobile phone. But I really don't want that data pop up when I'm in my car. I don't want to have to fish my phone out of my pocket and select one of those screens. So when I'm in my car and I've left the building, it's set up such that it just sends the call directly to my mobile. And now when I answer, I have that you have a call from John Tyler, say accept, reject, acknowledge. I have all the same functionality, but it's with my speech interface. I come back from lunch, I get into the building, but I don't make it to my desk. I get hijacked for a hallway meeting. That's happened to all of us. Not a bad thing. A lot of good work happens in hallway meetings. But the system knows I'm in the building from my mobile device. It also knows I'm not at my desk because one of the things we use for contacts is Skype. It knows my Skype status, which says I'm away still. So in my case, I just have it build a custom greeting saying I'm in the office, but I'm not at the phone. This is not very conducive for me getting things done. I'm going to go home and work the rest of my day at home. So I climb in my car. Once again, as soon as I drive out of my parking lot, it's sending calls to my mobile phone directly. And now in my case, when I get home during business hours, it sends calls to my Skype client because we have a full Skype integration with our product, which is very unusual, one of the few that has that. And that means I can use my Skype phone when I'm at home, but my desk phone when I'm at work, and my mobile phone in between. So what I've done here is I've had, and this is a pretty normal day for those of us that use our system, is I've had calls handled effectively depending on my context, where I am, what my calendar says, what my presence engine says. I have rules in place that know which device or list of devices to send calls to. I don't have to do that. As a user, I never have to touch this. I'm not going to go in and reset all this as my conditions change. We all know users won't do that. Secondly, if you didn't get through, as a caller, you got much better information. You have a pretty good idea of where I am and when I'll be available. And both of those features, the low requirements from the user and the high info back to the caller, make this system something that makes your business work more effectively, and it makes your customers more satisfied with feeling that they're at least a little bit in control. Now, this has been one of our longer webinars, so this next slide will be very much appreciated, I'm sure. We're ready for some questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Neil. All right, we do have a couple of questions that have already come in. Just to alert you, if you have a question that you haven't submitted already, use the orange arrow in the upper right corner, and once you expand that, you'll see the question box toward the bottom. Neil, first question came in, I think, when you were covering the speech auto attendant, and you may have partially answered this, but I'll go ahead and put it out there anyway. So how does the system accommodate a caller with an accent or a difficult-to-pronounce name, and can the caller still press 0?
Yes, well, if it's programmed correctly, you can always press 0. If there's anything we've learned over the years, is you need that escape hatch. In terms of, there's kind of two pieces to that question. Non-native English speakers. Now I'm assuming, so we do multilingual first of all, so you can put multiple speech recognition engines on the CX, but only one of them is in effect at one time. So let's assume call comes in, the US English engine is in place, and I have a caller that's a non-native English speaker. When Nuance does the development of this engine, now I have to admit that this is completely hearsay on my part. I've never talked to a Nuance employee, but I was told by one of the technicians, they go out and get about 10,000 people to call in and read scripts and do the same kind of thing you would do with Dragon Natural Speaking. So it's speaker independent, but the base they sample is huge. And of those 10,000 people, while some of them are core users, others are slightly off-center. And what I mean by that is they not only use kind of the neutral Midwestern, smallest accent is what it's considered, but they have people from the South, and they have, and they have people from Boston and people from California and all of that. And then they take other nationalities or other language speakers, like somebody who's Indian but speaks English, but English isn't their first language, maybe somebody who's Chinese, and they do a very wide range of other non-native speakers. Now what that means is if you're using our system and you're English as a second language person, it kind of turns out that if everyone can understand you when you talk to them, then the system should understand you fine. But if when you're talking to somebody, you constantly get, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that, excuse me, what was that? then the system will probably have issues as well. So it's just going to be a matter of, how close to the center somebody is when they're a non-native speaker. I can say it's pretty effective, but we have had cases where when people call in, particularly if they're doing like business with people in the Pacific Rim who are non-native speakers and don't even use English very much, where they have issues. So you always can, in the greeting right up front, give someone the option to press a key and go to a menu that is in their language and is all DTMF driven. So we have a lot of ways to make sure that caller can be handled. And then the second question was, how about names that are difficult to spell? And so I'll tell you right now, best practices when our team comes in and we're going to do a speech automated attendant is we ask to see a list of the usernames, and we go down and highlight the ones that we figure will be a problem. And the Muerta person that I talked about, that would have stuck out, and I would have known to go build a couple of aliases. So that's going to take kind of mapping those names and building alias names to support them.
Thanks, Neil. Okay, next question. Does the system integrate to Google Calendar?
No, today, I'm sorry. It integrates to the calendar as part of our integration to Google Apps, but it doesn't quite do everything that I talked about. It definitely uses a calendar to do routing and read announcements to the people and build custom greetings. You can read the calendar over the phone. What are my appointments? What we can't do is create new appointments over the telephone interface, which again is something that some people say is fantastic and others never use. But because the Google API that we use doesn't support that kind of functionality, that's the one thing we can't do. Other than that, it's pretty much like the Exchange calendar would be.
Okay, next. Do users have the choice of how they access their voicemail with unified messaging?
How they access it. Well, the type of unified messaging deployed for a user is controlled by the administrator. And it has to be that way because there are many businesses that simply will not let users put messages into Exchange. So we can't make that a user feature. Now, once the type of unified messaging is deployed, there are some user things that they can choose to do. Like if messages are left on CX, they can choose to get them from the mobile client. They can choose to get them from the web client. They can choose to get them just over the telephone. But what they can't do is say, oh, no, I would like my messages stored in Exchange, because we assume the administrator blocked that for a reason.
Okay. Next, is there integration with Microsoft 365 and the Cloud PBX? If a caller dials a number and the cell phone rings directly, do you integrate with Microsoft such that you complement their Cloud PBX by adding the acknowledge functionality? Loaded question.
It is a loaded question, and the Cloud PBX, if they truly mean the new Cloud PBX with like the E5 and E4 licenses, that is out so new that we haven't had a chance to really figure out how we work with that. We integrate with Office 365 in the cloud for everything we do. The one difference is, of course, today, if you have Office 365 and your Skype services are provided in the cloud, the normal Skype services, your on-site devices can't connect to those. That's something that's changing. And the Cloud PBX, the new Cloud PBX that they have, I will have to defer that question. I actually have a Microsoft seminar I'm going to tomorrow on that.
Okay, we can certainly follow up individually with the person who asked that question once we have more detail. Next question, any features to create personal and or business contact groups with alias and time setup to identify nature of incoming call from the contact group?
That is very high on our feature list. It's called VIP. Just kind of the industry, you can create a VIP list that means when one person calls you, the call gets handled one way. When another, it's the other way. It is something on our list in terms of when you expect to see it. It is not in the next release that comes out, which is 8.7 Software Update 1, which is out, I think, in the next couple of weeks. It may be in the one after that, but it's too early to tell yet.
Okay, Neil, I'm just doing a quick scroll here, and it looks like we got to all the questions that I'm seeing. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Want to let everyone know again that we will send out a follow-up email with the slides, as well as a link to the recording as soon as that's uploaded and available in case you want to review any of the content or forward it to someone who may have missed it. and just want to thank everyone for joining us, and I'll also let Neil go ahead and close us up.
Well, thank you. Same as Ann, I really appreciate everyone coming. It's difficult to take time out of your day. Be big on that feedback piece in terms of, if you let us know the types of things you want to have. Now, this webinar, as an example, was longer. Most of ours fall a little bit short of 30 minutes. This one had a little more content. And
to learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.